digestion. And it's not indicated on the schedule, but I thought I'd give an optional cadaver presentation today. Because I moved a lot of things to Proctorio, and I want to give you an in-lab chance experience. So there's a cadaver presentation that I typically give, and I'll focus primarily on the GI tract. And after lecture, I'll dismiss class, but if you'd like to participate in a cadaver presentation, just stay, okay? And that presentation is about 20 minutes, and you'll see a lot, okay? Everything's open and dissected, and you get a chance to see the digestive tract and other things, so think about that. All right, well, we're going to talk about the physiology of the stomach, which is basically how it's stimulated to secrete gastric juices in 3 phases. Basically I say head, stomach, small intestine. Okay. The first phase is all in your head, but the general idea for this part of the lecture is, let me get my stuff up here. That gastric secretion of the gastric juices are controlled by neural and hormonal mechanisms. That's the physiology in these 3 phases. The cephalic phase, basically it's all in your head. You're not actually eating, maybe you're at a restaurant and you're watching other people eat before you order. It makes you hungry. Or maybe before you even get out of your car, you're hungry. You get to the restaurant, your mouth starts watering. You smell the food and it makes you hungry. And that gets the juices flowing. It's kind of like when we studied the sympathetic reflexes, and I showed you that YouTube of the guy being choked out. I mean, his heart rate was racing just standing next to feed over, right? So, all in your head. When it comes to hunger, that gets the juices flowing. Now, the gastric phase is like you're sitting at the table and you're eating the main course. You're just eating, and all the food being introduced to the stomach is really getting the juices flowing. That's why I usually get appetizers. A little bit of food will kind of get the juices going. And by the time the main course comes, you're well ready to receive it. The intestinal phase, that's like you're done eating, you're full, okay? And the stomach is trying to empty. Maybe you're at someone's house and leave room for dessert, that kind of thing. You're actually trying to wait for the food to go down. So this could be hours after eating. Because remember, the duodenum is a small tube. The stomach is a big sac. So the stomach slowly empties. And when you empty the stomach to the intestine, this phase is basically trying to slow the stomach down because it can't handle very much. All right, so let's go through these 3 phases. Here's a picture of the cephalic phase, and with a mere sight, taste, aroma, or thought of food triggers this reflex. It's brief. What they do is they show you an empty stomach because you're not really eating yet, you're just thinking about food, your stomach's grumbling. And here are the things to pay attention to. This is a neural response. So anytime you study a neural response, just think about the neurotransmitter that's going to stimulate the gastric gland. Neural responses. Use the neurotransmitter ACH. Okay, that's going to stimulate the gastric gland. That's the structure we're talking about here. The gland secretes the gastric juice. And here are the cells that we're talking about here. Mucus cells, chief cells, parietal cells, and this is what they secrete. Mucus cells secrete mucus. Obviously, chief cells secrete pepsinogen. parietal cells secrete HCl. So these are the three components of the gastric juice. Whenever you see that term, it's these three things. That's the gastric juices, quote unquote. The mucus helps protect the stomach mucosa from eroding from the acid it's secreting. Pepsinogen, when it becomes activated, it will turn into pepsin and start to digest proteins. Okay. All right, so then you actually eat food in this phase. I have a lot of notes here, but the picture is kind of busy too. They show you a full stomach of acidic kind, and there's two things going on here. Okay, now your stomach is full, so there's a stretch reflex. So this phase was the cephalic phase. In the gastric phase, you have a full stomach. And what you're doing here is, with a full stomach, it's stretched out. The distension causes a stretch reflex that stimulates the gastric gland. I'm writing stretch reflex. And that reflex is a neural response too that causes ACH to stimulate the gland some more, to get more juice. The other thing is, if you're eating protein, amino acids tend to elevate the pH. Elevated pH is another trigger for more ACH release. So stretch reflex, increased pH, okay, that's another trigger for more ACH release to stimulate the gland, and that's here. There's another thing here. When partially digested proteins reach the pyloric region of the stomach basically says, you need to do a better job digesting proteins. So there are G cells that release the hormone gastrin as another mechanism to secrete more juice. I'm really out of room here. Let me go to the top. All right, write that again. If undigested proteins, PROs, reach the pyloric region of the stomach, cells they're called G cells or enteroendocrine cells. Both names are used. G cells, also called enteroendocrine. Those cells release the hormone gastrin. Gastrin is a hormone by its name. You can tell it will also stimulate the gastric gland, the same as ACH does. I'll just draw an arrow from it to gastric gland, it stimulates. So there are basically two ways you're stimulating the gland, either hormonally, gastrin, or neurally with ACH. Okay, that's basically all I had here. So those G cells, they're usually found in the pyloric region only. Now this phase is a long phase. It continues well after you finished your meal. It's about 3 hours long. Most of the gastric juice is secreted there. Now, we've noted the cell types of the gastric gland, but I want you to see it. They're in the mucosa. The gastric gland, shown here, they show you a slice of wall in the pyloric region, so we expect to see the enteroendocrine cells. What you see here is the whole, all 4 layers. Mucosa from here to there. Remember, muscularis mucosa is kind of like the boundary. Below that, you've got submucosa. You have 3 muscle layers of muscularis externa and serosa or adventitia. So these gastric glands, they're in the mucosa. And if you look at the surface of the endothelium, it has this kind of pitted appearance, like little gopher holes. So those little holes are called gastric pits. And those gastric pits lead to the gastric glands deep in the mucosa. So here's the surface of the endothelium. All these like little pits. And the surface of the epithelium. Now those gastric pits will kind of funnel down. They lead into gastric glands. Maybe few, maybe several. Lead to gastric glands. So it's like you have a thing where it just kind of, so the pit is up top, but the gland is this structure down there. So the mucosa is thrown into all these pits, so you have access to the glands. So it's like the gland uses the pit to kind of squirt out the juice. Here's a closer up picture of just the mucosa. So the epithelium is columnar cells, but they're thrown into these deep glands. So all around it would be lamina propria, connective tissue. So this is all mucosa. Okay, and this is the structure we want to study. And these are the cell types you want to know. All right, this is just looking at the gastric gland and the different cell types that we've already noted. Notice the fuzzy pitchforks? Those are the parietal cells. So all of this picture is basically cells like in this region here. Yeah, that's kind of what you're looking at there. Parietal cells have that, I call them pitchforks because they have 3 prongs. They have a lot of surface area. And they're going to secrete the HCl by secreting the hydrogen ion and the chloride ion separately. And they form HCl in the lumen of the stomach. They also secrete intrinsic factor. So I'll say they secrete acid and intrinsic factor. Remember I said that was a factor, it helps the gut absorb vitamin B12. All right, the most plentiful cell is the chief cell, right? It's the chief cell, it's the one that's you mostly see. purple ones. Now, chief cells are also called peptic cells because they secrete pepsinogen. They help digest proteins. They break peptide bonds. Now, in low pH, when the stomach is at rest, maybe the pH is 4 to 6. But an active stomach, the pH lowers to like 2. When pH gets less than 3, that is what converts pepsinogen into pepsin. So, low pH, maybe less than 3. pH less than 3, that'll stimulate the conversion of pepsinogen into the active form, pepsin, breaks peptide bonds. Active form. Okay, and then, I already wrote it, I won't write it again, but just the enteroendocrine cells secrete gastrin. Here's a picture of a parietal cell. It's showing you one thing here, what I already drew on the board. The hydrogen ions are secreted separate from the chloride ions, forms HCl and aluminum. Now, in terms of ion exchange, you exchange a chloride ion for a bicarb. So they have this called this alkaline tie. That's important. The secreted bicarb can help form a chemical barrier to protect the surface of the stomach, shown in this picture here. Because it's so acidic in the stomach, about 2 in an active stomach, that the mucus layer is a physical barrier, but the bicarb is a chemical barrier so that at the cell surface it's pH neutral. So you don't get an ulcer. Of course you could get an ulcer, but this usually normally prevents it. So, the stomach mucosa is protected by a mucus physical barrier and a bicarb chemical barrier. Physical barrier. And a bicarbonate chemical barrier. All right, so we looked at the gastric gland, and now let's talk about the third phase, gastric emptying, or the intestinal phase. All right, and what I say on this slide is, in this phase, you want to inhibit stomach churning. As the stomach empties, you decrease the stomach stretch, you increase the duodenal stretch. Both of those inhibit the myenteric plexus. And here are all the hormones I want you to know, because now we're getting to digestion in the small intestine, and the duodenum is very important. So let me define all these hormones. Chyme is the product of the stomach doing its job. It's essentially vomit. Of course, vomit is disgusting when it regurgitates, but that's what the stomach is supposed to do. Okay, a nice healthy vomit is vomit for a bad reason, but at least your stomach mucosa is working. It's secreting all those juices, all that acid, and that's what it's supposed to do. It's being sent to the duodenum. Chyme reaches the duodenum. To understand this phase, just study what these hormones do. Focus on the duodenal hormones that are released. So these are not hormones that we taught in endocrine. Okay, we're teaching them now. And the first one listed there is cholecystokinin, CCK. And to think about hormones, remember, the endocrine reflexes, what I had explained was something triggers their release to correct some imbalance or something. So you have to think about what's in the chyme. What are you trying to digest or neutralize? And in the case of CCK, if there's a lot of fat in the food you ate and it reaches the duodenum, combination of fat or protein that's in the chyme, that's a trigger for the release of the hormone from the duodenum, cholecystokinin. The word cholecystokinin means move bile. And its action is it will do a couple of things, or a few things. It will stimulate the pancreas to secrete pancreatic enzymes. I'll define them later. To actually move the bile, it'll stimulate gallbladder contraction. And I put this picture here. If you look at the little green sac right under the right lobe of the liver, that's what it's targeting. It just kind of squeezes that little sac. So secondly, stimulates gallbladder contraction. Gallbladder has the concentrated bile. Our cadaver has a gallbladder. If you stick around for that presentation, you'll see a gallbladder. A lot of times I open up cadavers and it's like a 50-50 shot if it's there or not. You know, the removal of a gallbladder is a very common procedure. Here's the thing, if you're gonna squeeze that gallbladder, you have to relax this sphincter. There's a little sphincter there, I'll show you a better picture of it later, that has to open up. Otherwise, the resistance will be too much and you're just squeezing for nothing. It's like squeezing a tube of toothpaste, but the cap's still screwed on tight, okay? And like unscrew the cap and squeeze, right? It's kind of like what you have to do. So CCK also relaxes that sphincter. It's called a hepatopancreatic sphincter. Relax hepatopancreatic sphincter. Okay, that's the first hormone. The second hormone I have listed is gastric inhibitory peptide. If there's fat or carbs in the chyme, that's a stimulus for the release of gastric inhibitory peptide. I'm just going to abbreviate the GIP. Gastric inhibitory peptide. That stimulates the release of insulin. That'll help you deal with the carbs and it stimulates adipose to perform lipid synthesis. Adipocytes do lipid synthesis. Okay, so that's that one. Let's see. Okay, secretin, that's the main one. I would say cholecystokinin and this next one, secretin. Those are more important. Now, secretin, what it does, it's stimulated in response to the acid that's in the chyme. So acid needs to be neutralized. One thing secretin will do, it will stimulate the pancreas to secrete buffers. The pancreas secretes enzymes. It also secretes acid neutralizers, namely bicarb. That'll neutralize the acid, but it would also stimulate the liver to produce bile. So secretin is doing what it's supposed to do. It's stimulating liver and pancreas to secrete things. Buffer juice from the pancreas and bile production from the liver. Don't put a check mark next to the more important things. Anything that's from pancreas has digestive juices in it. Gallbladder, remember that's moving bile. This right here, these two. Check again, check again. I'm trying to make the liver and pancreas stand out. Okay, I want you to know all of these hormones and everything that's up there. But the liver and the pancreas, those are the key accessory organs to digestion. So that's why I'm kind of highlighting them. Got a couple more here. There's VIP and gastric. For a VIP, it's a vasoactive intestinal peptide. Basically, just chyme itself will trigger its release. VIP. It's going to help dilate intestinal capillaries to get them ready for absorption. So all the blood rushes to your GI tract. Dilate intestinal capillaries for absorption. Now, that's why I get a little sleepy after a meal. Okay, the gastrin, this is the second time we're seeing it. The first time we saw it was from the pyloric region of the gastric glands. And we're seeing it released here too. If partially digested proteins reach the duodenum, you need more gastric juice to increase the digestion. So I'm writing partially digested proteins. That will stimulate the release of gastrin. And as I said before, you get more gastric juices. So that's a lot of hormonal stuff to know. One last thing I'll say about all of these hormones except for gastrin. A big line here. cholecystokinin, GIP, secretin, VIP, they all inhibit gastric juice secretion and churning. You're trying to slow it down so it can receive at a comfortable rate the chyme. So let me just kind of do this. So these all. So this one, the blue star, this one, this one, this one. Inhibit stomach churning and gastric secretion. Churning / secretion. Okay. So the duodenum is pretty important. All of those hormones are during this phase of stomach emptying. The duodenum itself is not much to look at. It's basically just the first 10 or 12 inches of the small intestine, which is like 21 feet long. Here's a nice picture of it. And let's think about everything you had to remove to see it, because part of it's retroperitoneal. And I like the picture. You can kind of tell it's retro. See how like part of the membrane is cut away there? Like there's like a little bit of kidney and the rest of it's behind the body wall. Here, this part of the duodenum is intraperitoneal, then it goes retro. It's like retro, then it pops out here. Okay, it's a good picture. There's the spleen. There's the pancreas sitting in this kind of C-shaped portion of the duodenum. What's missing? Stomach. You had to cut the stomach there and there. What's the biggest solid organ missing here? Liver. Liver on the right, spleen on the left. Always remember that. Liver on the right, spleen on the left. All of these are hepatic veins draining the liver. Okay. Well, anyways, let's get back to the duodenum. That's what I want to teach here. You even have to cut away transverse colon to get a full view of the duodenum. So that's where it is anatomically. It's an important part. It's like a point of fixation for the small intestines, because the rest of the small intestines are just kind of hanging out intraperitoneal. But the retroperitoneal part of the duodenum makes it a kind of a support pit. First part of the small intestine after the pyloric sphincter of the stomach. Let's go back to stomach for a second. So you have that pyloric sphincter right there. You get all this chyme. And you're squirting a little bit of chyme into the duodenum. One thing about the small intestine is it has a lot of grooves in it, just like the stomach do. remember what the longitudinal grooves are called in the stomach? Starts with an R. Rugae. Those are the longitudinal folds of the stomach. Yeah. However, when you get to the small intestine, those grooves change to circular ones. Kind of like circular grooves. Those are called the plica circularis, or just plica for short. Circular grooves instead of longitudinal grooves. The thing about the stomach is, it's got a sphincter at both locations. And it's like you want the stuff to just slosh back and forth as the stomach churns. But when you squirt it to the small intestine, you want it to like spiral around the grooves to increase the contact time and slowly, slowly make your way through to increase the contact time, slow it down, allow time for digestion to take place. Chemical digestion. Okay, well, don't worry about these different parts. I'm not going to ask you D1 to D4. But I will point out one thing in the D2 that you have to find. On the inside of this part that's descending is a little sphincter that allows it to receive secretions of liver, pancreas. Okay. I'm going to draw this a little bigger. Duodenum, first part, second part goes down like that. There's like a little nipple-shaped papilla there that's receiving bile from the bile duct. And all the pancreatic secretions from a structure called main pancreatic duct. There's also an accessory pancreatic duct. You don't have to know that one. Main pancreatic duct. So all the secretions from liver, bile, all the pancreatic secretions are emptying to this one location, and on the inside of the small intestine, looks like a little nipple-shaped structure. It's called different things. I'll call it major duodenal papilla. Remember, papilla means nipple shaped. All right, more pictures of duodenum. That's why I like the atlas. It gives me more of a palette to show students what it is, what it looks like. So again, our organs, oh look, we got gallbladder, big old liver, spleen, pancreas, head of the pancreas sitting in the C-shaped duodenum. Here, more stuff has been removed. This is kind of like a deeper dissection. This one I like. They show, what did you cut? Right there. What did you cut it from? What's supposed to be here? Stomach. Stomach is intraperitoneal. Duodenum goes retro. Okay, retro. Pops back intra. That's the end of the duodenum, the beginning of the jejunum. So they call this little bend the duodenal jejunal flexure. Okay. So it goes jejunum, then the ileum, and that's the end of the small intestine. So they cut it. See how they cut it away off of the mesentery, right, like that. Imagine you had a 21-foot long python. You put the python in a cloth bag. Now imagine gathering up the cloth bag. You've got the python at the bottom. In my analogy, what's the python? The intestine. The cloth bag is the mesentery, right here. Here's you gathering up the cloth bag, and it roots to the back. So look at the picture on the right. Do you see this cut edge? That's where they cut. This is called the root of the mesentery. I think I had you write that down. Yeah, let's write it again. A little side note, this is not duodenum. I'm writing intestines attached to the back body wall via root of the mesentery. So look at that figure to see the root of it. So literally, they cut it right there. Okay, so that's a good picture to see some things. And let's go back and look at the duodenum. This picture here, this side by side, the picture on the left we looked at before. The picture on the right is a more detailed view. You see your major duodenal papilla, a little nipple-shaped thing. You kind of see right here the end of the pyloric sphincter, the longitudinal folds. When you get to here, and it becomes circular, right? The plica. There's major duodenal papilla, there's pancreatic duct, there's bile duct, right there. The empty right there, they share that opening. Okay. That major duodenal papilla, inside of it is that muscular sphincter. You wrote it down before as the hepatopancreatic sphincter. Major duodenal papilla contains hepatopancreatic sphincter. Remember, CCK will relax it to allow the juices to squirt into the duodenum. So imagine there's a tiny sphincter in there. I'll draw a little red thing in there. It's smooth muscle. They show the layering of the GI tract wall. Right there, you do a nice job of that. One thing to note, it's a landmark. These vessels are in your study guide. They are the superior mesenteric artery and vein. They go over the duodenum. Always look for that. Superior mesenteric A and V go over duodenum. So some more pictures of it. Here's the picture we just looked at on the left. Our picture on the right shows you a little bit more. We're going to learn these arteries coming up here, but here's what I want you to see. They're going over the duodenum. A couple more pictures. And the model on the left here, this is the duodenum. If I see vessels going over it, it must be the superior mesenteric artery, SMA. Okay, there it is there. If this is the duodenum, and that's the pancreas, what is that white structure in the pancreas? You wrote it in there, main pancreatic duct. Okay? All right, this is the colon. but it shows you the posterior aspect of duodenum. Okay, there it is popping out there, it goes on as jejunum. And there it is, superior mesenteric artery and vein going in front of it, because we're looking from behind. All right, so you see it there, SMA. You know where to look. It goes over duodenum. I see duodenum right here. Identify yellow stuff. Kind. Right there, there's the vein. Here's the rugal folds. Okay, if I say identify folds, where are you going to put it? Put plica. Okay. All right. So let's talk about blood supply to this area, not the SMA, the celiac trunk. That's the first branch coming off abdominal aorta at about the level of C12. Here, it's not abdominal aorta, it's thoracic aorta. As soon as you go through the aortic hiatus and pop through there, now you're abdominal aorta. Just like from here. Pop out right there, abdominal aorta, the first branch coming off, celiac trunk. Celiac trunk has many branches. Okay, let's take a look at them. All right here is what we're going to look at. So there's three main branches coming off here. Two go to the left, one goes to the right. One big one that's going off to the left goes to spleen. This picture here removes the stomach so you can get a full view of the splenic artery. Let's go back to this one. So you pop through the aortic hiatus and you are the abdominal aorta. Call number one. First branch coming off, I'll just draw it as a circle on abdominal aorta. Call number two, celiac trunk. Which immediately divides into three major branches. The biggest branch going off to the left, to the spleen, is called the splenic artery. Another branch going up and off to the left, this branch here, and it's following the lesser curvature of the stomach is the left gastric artery. Goes up, follows the lesser curvature of the stomach. Column number 4. Left gastric artery. Right, there's a major branch going off to the right. It's the common hepatic artery. Column number 5. Common hepatic artery. It's common to a bunch of branches. The first branch that comes off and goes inferiorly to the duodenum is called the gastroduodenal artery. This branch coming off right there. The first one coming off. So, backing up, common hepatic, boop, branches, goes down, gastroduodenal. Let's call it number 6. Gastroduodenal artery. Okay. Now, there's another branch that comes off common hepatic, number 5, and it's going to branch off and follow the lesser curvature of the stomach. It's the right gastric. and it's going to anastomose with left gastric. So call it number 7. Right gastric artery. Okay, a couple more. Now, the greater curvature of the stomach has this artery following its curvature. It's called gastro-omental because it's like inside the greater omentum. So branching off of gastroduodenal is this left, oh no, excuse me, that would be on the right side. It would be the right gastro-omental artery. Call number 8. Right gastro-omental artery. Branching off splenic artery is the left gastro-omental artery, which will anastomose with the one on the right. So call that number 9. Yeah, left gastro-omental artery. Not quite done. I got to finish by going to the liver. The common hepatic gave off 2 branches. First one gastroduodenal, second one the right gastric. The rest of it goes to the liver, and you just call it hepatic artery or proper hepatic artery. To liver and proper hepatic artery. Piece of cake, just 10 arteries. You'll get the hang of it real quick. You study all these pictures. I mean, it's all showing you the same thing. I give you page numbers for those of you who bought the atlas. Let's practice. Here's what you should be able to do. Okay. Oh yeah, left gastric, splenic. What's this one? Common hepatic. First branch, gastroduodenum. Second branch, right gastric. What's the rest of it? Proper hepatic. Yeah, so you're starting to get it now. The process doesn't take that long. But yeah, that's the blood supply to this area. And yeah, you are responsible for that. So getting back to organs, we did stomach, we did duodenum, let's do pancreas. The pancreas is behind the stomach. It's elongated soft tissue, it's glandular. It has both endocrine and exocrine function. The exocrine secretions are mostly what we talk about here in a digestion chapter. It uses that main pancreatic duct or just pancreatic duct. Its shape resembles an inverted tobacco pipe. Well, here's a picture of a model that shows it doesn't look like a tobacco pipe there. You can't see it all, but I like the white main pancreatic duct. Okay. That's what's showing well. Well, I want to focus on what it secretes. It's not much to look at anatomically. So the pancreatic juices are basically bicarb and enzymes. The enzymes break the polymers into monomers. The bicarb neutralizes acid. Okay. That's what I have on the slide. Focus on the juice. We studied the juice of the stomach, which was three things: the HCl, the mucus, and the pepsinogen. Pancreatic juice is mostly bicarb juice. Enzyme-rich juice. That's basically it. It's about a liter and a half daily, mostly water. And I want you to learn the acinar cells. I'll show you that. But here are all the pancreatic enzymes when I say enzyme-rich juice. I'll show you a slide showing you the proteases as an example. And they all work the same to digest everything that you could possibly eat, mainly protein, carbs, fats, and even nucleic acids. All right, so here's a picture of how the proteases work and how they're released in an inactive form and triggered to their active forms only in the lumen of the duodenum. So the enzyme-rich, actually RCH, enzyme-rich, sorry. So the enzyme I'll use as an example, proteases digest proteins. The proteases include trypsinogen, chymotrypsinogen, procarboxypeptidase. Let's start with trypsinogen. It's an inactive form of the enzyme. You want to do that so you don't auto-digest. If you secrete in an active form, you'll just digest the organ that's secreting it. Secrete in an inactive form, activate in the lumen. Trypsinogen, inactive. What activates it? There's this membrane-bound enteropeptidase on the slide there. It's inside the lumen. That's where it's going to be activated. So that activates the trypsinogen to its active form, trypsin. And then that first activated trypsin will then activate the other proteases, okay, in the lumen. Activates other proteases in the lumen. So the thing to learn there, remember that membrane-bound enteropeptidase. Students have a tough time with that one. The concept is activate in the lumen. Don't activate in the organ. You'll auto-digest. That's another thing to take away. Prevent auto-digestion. Here's a microscopic picture of the cells in the pancreas. Learn the acinus structure. Acinus means bulbous shape, shaped like a light bulb. Okay, let's learn about secretin and CCK. They target the pancreas. Before I erase this, I'll add that thing I just said. This here prevents autodigestion. What you're looking at here is basically here, more simplified. Some duct cells. they're connected to this the acinar cells. And the different cells are responsive to different things, different hormones. You got duct acinar. So what I have there is secretin. Let's remember that. That was being released in response to acid. So you want to neutralize it. Acts on the duct cells to secrete the bicarb. So acid needs to be neutralized. That's a stimulus for the release of secretin. That's the hormone that stimulates the duct cells. And in response, they'll release that bicarb juice. Okay, you have fat cells. You have acinar cells. In response to fat, CCK is released. You need fat digestion. So fat stimulates the release of CCK. CCK will then stimulate the acinar cells to release pancreatic enzymes, like the lipases that will help digest fats. Now, that's what I say on the slide. And so basically, as a result, you're going to get the enzyme-rich juice from CCK to balance the fat digestion, the bicarb-rich juice to neutralize acid. Now, the third thing that wasn't on that slide. I threw it in here. In addition to the bicarb-rich juice from the duct cells, and this CCK causing the acinar cells to release the enzyme-rich juice. Okay, those are used and secreted into the GI tract via the main pancreatic duct. Okay, that's where these ultimately go. Next stop. I'll just write it, main pancreatic duct. And I already drew a picture of that. That goes to the duodenum. Okay. Now the third thing that doesn't use the main pancreatic duct is endocrine function. GIP will stimulate beta cells to release insulin. Remember the pancreatic islet? Those don't use the duct, they use the bloodstream. So remember that lab I tried to have you identify that clump of cells, pancreatic islets. So GIP, maybe there's stepping back all the way to the carbs in the food you ate, is a stimulus for the release of GIP, which will stimulate the beta cells in the islets to release insulin. So I'll draw insulin. Insulin will not use the main pancreatic duct. It's a hormone. It'll get into the bloodstream. So that's a third thing about the pancreas. But that third thing is endocrine function, not exocrine function. All right, so that's the pancreas role. And I want to talk about liver. Liver is your largest glandular organ. It's about 2% of your body weight. It has a soft brownish color. It does a lot. It receives venous blood returning from the GI tract through a portal vein, which is laden with products of digestion. Basically, it has all the goodies, all the food you ate. It's also a storehouse for glycogen, and its main job in helping in digestion is to secrete bile. All right, so. picture of the liver in the body, outside of the body. Let's talk about its anatomy first. Okay, let's look at these ligaments here. Oh, let me just got these ligaments at the top there. You have these big lobes of the liver. The left one's a little bit smaller. Right one's a little bigger. These two ligaments that are like a crown on top are the coronary ligaments. When they fuse and divide the lobes, this is the right lobe and the left lobe, I should say. The right lobe of the liver is the big one. There's the left lobe. We're divided by this falciform ligament in the middle, formed by the two coronary ligaments coming together. Basically from here to here, as I've drawn it, falciform. Falciform ligament, well, you can't tell from here, it's been removed from the body. It attaches to the front body wall. Falciform ligament at the bottom edge, I drew a little circle there. That's the round ligament. Okay, there's a little blood vessel inside. It's the remnant of the umbilical vein. So this is the ligamentum teres, or round ligament, containing what used to be the umbilical vein. Round ligament with umbilical vein inside of it. It's kind of hard to see, it's why I drew it a little bit bigger. So falciform, a little opening there, contains the obliterated umbilical vein. So the two ligaments I have here, we noted the round ligament, also called ligamentum teres. Teres means round. Oh, I forgot to draw. You can kind of see a little bit of a gallbladder peeking out there. Around here. So this is showing you the inside of the front body wall. So imagine if you just took your front off and looked at it. Oh, that's what I look like on the inside. Right there. That is that. So this is the inside of what? Don't think too hard. It's not a difficult anatomy structure. Your belly button. It's the inside of your belly button. So this makes sense, right? Here you got one umbilical vein. See these two right there? Two umbilical arteries. One, two. They punch out that hole. On the other side, when you're a fetus, was the umbilical cord. That's just the inside of it. Again, one umbilical vein, and how many arteries? Two. That's what we learned before, right? Right there, they go out your belly button. Very good, so now you've seen the inside of your belly button, probably never saw that before. So no round ligament and falciform ligament. identify? Falciform. Yeah, just on the inside of the body cavity. Here's an inferior view of the liver. Okay. Now we have liver models here. I took pictures of. It's interesting how it would fit in the body is like this. The stand faces you. But basically, this model is kind of like this picture there. Okay, so it's a good model to study for the liver in the classroom, in open lab. So to orient ourselves, we're looking at the liver from the bottom. It's an inferior view. Now here's inferior to the kidney. So is this anterior or posterior? Posterior. Yeah. So kind of like that. And we've got a couple of other lobes of the liver that we can't see from the front. They are a little tail of the lobe, caudate and quadrate. Quadrate, four sides, tail. Caudate lobe, quadrate lobe. And you have this doorway to the liver called the porta hepatis, which means doorway. Here's our little round ligament. Containing umbilical vein, and the membrane that forms coming out the round ligament. Draw like they do, kind of like that. That's the porta hepatis. Trying to see the term porta hepatis. It's not really happening. It's okay. I'll draw it right on the board for you. Hepatis. Hepatic always refers to liver. Okay, this doorway in. Let's see here. The gallbladder. One landmark is always look for the gallbladder right next to quadrate lobe on the right side. Here's my green. Oh, wait, I'm sorry. I meant to draw it up here. Oh, I messed up. Shoot. Sorry.
What is the red stuff?
Try to draw this in there. What's
What's the
that?
red stuff in the round ligament? Is that in front?
Yeah, the red stuff is that.
Oh, okay.
So it's the umbilical vein. Yeah, sorry about that. Messed that up. So one thing coming out of the porta hepatis is the bile duct. Install the gallbladder. Next to quadrate lobe. Okay, so one thing coming out of this doorway is the bile duct. I'll just put a little number 1 there. Bile duct, obviously containing bile. There's the gallbladder. The liver has a dual blood supply, but a single venous drainage. Once again, dual blood supply, single venous drainage. So the two vessels bringing blood to the liver are right there. It's the portal vein and proper hepatic artery, which I already mentioned. Portal vein. Call it number 2. Number 3, proper hepatic artery. Those are basically the contents I want you to know of the porta hepatis, the doorway to the liver. You should know that the portal vein, it contains the nutrient richness that just came from the intestines. All the intestinal capillaries absorb all the food you ate, and they all drain to the portal vein. So everything that you ate is processed by the liver first before it goes to systemic circulation. So portal blood, it doesn't have oxygen because the intestinal capillaries, the gas exchange happened there, okay? So it's not oxygen rich, but it's nutrient laden. All the nutrients from the food you ate. Okay, the hepatic artery, proper hepatic artery, that's O2 rich. That's bringing the oxygen. Okay, so they say it's about 75-25 portal blood, hepatic artery blood. I don't think the proportions matter too much, just so you know that both of these things, this is the dual blood supply to the liver. It's delivering the blood. So I think what's remarkable is the one umbilical vein in fetal circulation accomplishes what these two vessels do when you're an adult. So that one umbilical vein is pretty good, right? It's got the nutrient-laden blood and the O2 rich blood from mom, one umbilical vein. In an adult, these two vessels bring blood to the liver. Okay. To finish my picture here, there should be a ligament that goes kind of like that. So if you look at this, I got all 4 lobes: caudate, quadrate, right lobe. This is the smaller left lobe from the inferior view. That completes the picture. Oh, you know what? I should add one thing. Students always miss this. That one vessel right there is the hepatic vein, and you always confuse it with the portal vein. Remember, liver, dual blood supply, single venous drainage. Let me draw one hepatic vein. Here's inferior vena cava, IVC. Here's a hepatic vein going right to it. Note to yourself, don't confuse hepatic vein with portal vein. They have opposite functions. The portal vein delivers blood. The hepatic vein is draining the blood. So once blood gets to the hepatic vein, the liver is done processing the blood and you're back into systemic circulation. Here are the two pictures we've been looking at side by side here. This is the anterior view on the left. On the right is an inferior view. Here's a closer up, so you can study the porta hepatis. Know the three things: portal vein, proper hepatic artery, bile duct. Blood coming in, bile coming out. So the gallbladder, let's take a look at it a little bit more. It's pear-shaped along the right edge of quadrate lobe. It's bluish green in color. Hold about 30 to 60 ml of bile. Picture of it. Now, the gallbladder's main function is to store and concentrate the bladder. Store and concentrate the bile, not the bladder, sorry. Store, concentrate bile. It just stores it. It doesn't make it. The liver produces bile. The liver produces something like 900 ml bile daily. You would call that dilute bile. Now, about 450 ml is produced between meals when you're not eating. Okay. 450 ml bile produced between meals. Now, when you're not eating, there's no CCK to relax that sphincter. So you're producing bile, it's like too much resistance there, it backwashes into bile. And when it's backwashed into when the bile is backwashed into the gallbladder, that's when the gallbladder concentrates it. Take a look at an inside picture here. So again, between meals, you're making bile about 450 ml a day. But this is, the sphincter is shut, so it kind of backwashes here through this spiral valve, okay? The gallbladder doesn't have a sphincter, it has a spiral valve, so it's always open. You just spiral in the bile. If you look at the surface, the absorptive surface of the gallbladder, it kind of evaporates the water and salts, concentrating the bile. So this one, between meals, backwashes to gallbladder. Gallbladder. I'm writing the absorptive surface concentrates bile. So when you eat and you get bile production from the liver and you get gallbladder contraction from CCK, the bile that reaches major duodenal papilla and gets in, it's about 500 ml daily, and it's a mixture of concentrated and dilute bile. About 500 ml bile reaches duodenum daily. It's a mix of dilute concentrated bile. I remember one time after Thanksgiving dinner, I sat back on the couch. I swear I could feel my gallbladder contract. I felt this little pop, 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 pop. You're not supposed to feel it, but I don't know, maybe you can, I don't know. The gallbladder holds a lot. I mean, gallstones, I think we have some here. These are it. They can form, and that would be a reason to remove the gallbladder. Okay, oh, I also use this picture to teach the duct system. You need to know all the anatomy there, so let me outline that for you. What is this? All right. Basically what you got, look at the top of the screen there. You have right and left hepatic ducts. They're draining bile from right, left lobes of the liver. So right and left hepatic ducts. They merge to form common hepatic duct. Here's gallbladder. Gallbladder has a cystic duct. And the cystic duct and common bile duct merge to form bile duct. So that's the biliary system. That's what you gotta know. That'll help you when you look at pictures. So always orient yourself. Find the gallbladder right next to the right lobe. So there's quadrate lobe, there's caudate lobe. Here's the porta hepatis. There's the portal vein, there's the hepatic artery, there's the bile duct. So if you know your biliary system, it goes, if that's the right lobe, what's that? The right hepatic duct. If that's the left lobe, what's that one? Left hepatic duct. They merge to form common hepatic duct, cystic duct. They merge to form at the tip, bile duct. Here, I reversed the orientation. It's okay. Orient yourself. If that's gallbladder, if that's quadrate lobe, this is the right side. If this is the right side, that is right hepatic duct, left hepatic duct, common hepatic duct, cystic duct, bile duct, portal vein, there's the artery. Okay. And there, we can't really see it there. Let's move on. Can't see it in there. It's a little blurry, you can still see it. Let's orient ourselves. If that's the quadrate lobe, that's the right side of it. That's the gallbladder. This is the right hepatic duct, left hepatic duct, common hepatic duct, cystic duct, bile duct. What do you think the purple vessel is? Portal vein. And then the red one is obviously the artery. Okay. All right, here's one that don't call this the portal vein. What did we say this was? Hepatic vein, not to be confused with portal vein. One's delivering blood, one is draining blood into the inferior vena cava. All right, let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll do the walk. Come back in 20 minutes.